Secretary of State John Kerry arriving in Vienna for a series of meetings with other diplomats leading up to the main event tomorrow. Talks that are being called the best chance yet to end one of the world's most horrible and bloody conflicts, the civil war in Syria, now in its 5th year. With the Islamic State digging in and Russia intensifying its military involvement, the search for a diplomatic solution is taking on new urgency. But there's a new layer, a new player at the table. Iran's former minister is allowed for the very first time to take part in the Syria talks. He was invited by our president, showing Tehran's growing influence in the Middle East. Secretary Kerry using graphic language to describe the challenge of ending the war.
My friends, the challenge that we face in Syria today is nothing less than to chart a course out of hell.
All right, so coming out of the White House today, Speaker, is the news that the president feels like he's willing to talk to any country to get to some solution with Iran. What are your thoughts? Or with Syria, rather.
Look, this president and his Secretary of State live a very rich fantasy life. You know, they've kicked Russia out of Crimea. They have protected Ukraine. They have created democracy in Libya. Now they're going to wave a magic wand and they're going to create a new Syrian system so that Syrians will leave Germany and go back to Syria. And then finally they will turn to Israel, and in a wonderful magic moment they will create peace in Israel by giving the whole country to the Palestinians. I mean, these two guys get together. Kerry has never been particularly fond of America. Go back and look at his testimony in the Vietnam War period. He's now had a chance to go around the world and surrender as often as people will meet with him. And so now he's going to have the Iranian dictatorship, which is the largest supporter of terrorism on the planet, is going to sit and be dignified. And guess who they have to sit with? Putin. So Putin ends up as the great winner. Obama's the great loser, but Obama's the kind of guy who, if he was at your Christmas party and you kicked him out, he would think that you really wanted him to get fresh air, and he'd be grateful.
Wow. You know what? I want to press in on something that you just said, though, because it's ripped right out of the headlines, and that's Iran's human rights record. I mean, they are on track. Reports of killing 1,000 people by the end of the year. That's more than since we've been keeping records that we could get our hands on how many they actually execute inside of Iran. And they're going before the UN today to talk about that. But, you know, the whole world is watching, as you point out. So it isn't just about how we deal with Iran or Russia, but you've got countries now like Venezuela, Burundi. They're all this week lobbying the United Nations to get on the Human Rights Council. And they're some of the biggest abusers out there of human rights.
Look, the current system is totally sick. The State Department is an enabler of the sickness. This president actually has no notion how sick it is and thinks that it's actually really good and healthy. And one of the reasons that I wrote Duplicity is to have a novel that combines terrorism and politics to show you that this stuff is all very, very dangerous. And I don't think the Obama White House has a clue how much damage they're doing.
Newt, one of the things I've noticed is that the Democrats are already getting nervous because Iran is looking more and more belligerent. And this is before all the money is flowing in from the, deal that they got from Kerry. You know, they own this, don't they? The Democrat, if this goes bad with Iran, they own it.
No, they won't own it, because the Democrats will go on the elite media and they will say, what deal? Well, I never saw a deal. Did you see a deal? We didn't do a deal. And they'll just lie.
How can they get away with that?
Well, how does Hillary Clinton get away with totally lying to the parents of people who were killed, looking them in the face as the casket arrives and lying to them?
She has a black hole. I was going to say where her soul should be.
Yeah, she's soulless.
But Speaker, how could the White House underestimate? I guess it is the sort of magical incantations
they live in a magic planet.
Of Fantasyland. But how could they underestimate the union between Russia and Iran for all of these years? I mean, they should have anticipated that Putin would do exactly what he would do with Syria and Iran. How did they get that so wrong?
I think they live in the equivalent of Epcot. I think they get up in the morning, and I mean, it's literally, they live in a fantasy world, and Kerry and the State Department, which lives in a fantasy world and needs to be, this is one of the things our presidential candidates should commit to. The State Department needs to be totally overhauled, because it has people in it who are just consistently wrong. And consistently, by the way, anti-Israel, and consistently lying about the nature of our opponents.
At least work with
wrong and unwilling to admit when they're wrong and change, too.
But that fantasy you talk about is about to get very real, because that's what you were talking about, Rachel. I mean, we've seen Iran just recently launch a missile. supposedly, according to the UN ambassador Samantha Power, against the deal that we just made with them. But I'm hearing crickets when it comes to accountability right now. I think they're still trying to press for meetings. We'll move on. Stunning developments in a story we have been following. A high school football coach benched now for refusing to stop praying at the 50-yard line. Why the school district now says this poses big problems having him pray like this.